We're live.
Okay, we're live at the, so Anthony, we're live. So good afternoon and welcome to the 2:30 PM Wednesday, February 25th, 2006 Public Works Committee meeting. Shall we get started, everybody? Okay, so.
We're not the ones talking.
What's
So
that?
we're not the ones talking.
Oh, yeah. Mr.
The
Cat.
chair is speaking. Thank you.
I call this meeting to order. And I want to go ahead and try to get through this in respect of time constraints with Clutch here today to give a presentation. So I want us to be able to. Yeah, I want to, well, I mean, I just want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So item number 2, Jackie Price, appointment to the Tulsa Stadium Trust replacing John Bumgarner. Term expires March 4th, 2030, CD4. Hi.
Hi.
Would you like to tell us about yourself and? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jackie Price Johansson. I'm the president of Price Family Properties. We own and operate buildings in downtown Tulsa, so thank you for having me.
It's a good name, Jackie.
Oh.
I know. Yes.
Could you tell us a bit more about your interest or how your all's properties interrelate, maybe with the Stadium Trust, or what perspective you're bringing?
Absolutely. We have commercial and residential properties all downtown, less than probably about half a mile from the stadium, bringing in tenants and residents, thousands a day, and obviously having the stadium downtown and walkable from everything that we do. It's important to us to make sure that everything is handled correctly and appropriately.
What's your role at Price?
I'm the president.
Okay. Well, pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you so much for volunteering. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for, you're always doing a lot of voluntary service to the community, so we do appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it Jacqueline or Jackie?
I go by Jackie, but
Yeah.
it is Jacqueline.
Yeah, ditto. Q-U-E-L-I-N.
That's right.
Ah, good
That's
Catholic
right.
way.
All right.
Just saying.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, moving on to item number 3, discussion and presentation by representatives from Clutch Consulting Group regarding the system and financial modeling for the Safe Move Tulsa initiative and related recommendations for homelessness programs in Tulsa. Come on up.
My eyes don't work that far.
And I need to get my head out of the way. You see? Get it started.
No, she's not here.
Okay. I know.
Where's Councilor Bacon?
Welcome to the table, Mark Smith,
Thank you.
Emily, and
You should be able to just do it by that, the side arrow.
Yep.
Okay.
And I take it that you're Mandy.
I'm Mandy.
All right, welcome to the table. Thank you. Let's get started.
Thanks. Well, thank you all for having me. It's, I've met a few of you in other meetings, but it's really great to be here in person. So my name is Mandy Chapman Semple. I'm managing partner of Clutch Consulting. Clutch is, we kind of say small but mighty firm out of Texas. And we were really formed from the work that we did in Houston back in 2012 to kind of 2018, and coming out of the success that we had in Houston, we really felt like there was an opportunity to help other communities across the country work to achieve significant reductions in homelessness. And so Clutch was formed in 2018. And many of us are still based in Texas, but we, have about 10 total employees, and we work in communities across the country, continuing to kind of innovate and support comprehensive transformation of homelessness response systems. And I would say in the last several years, that's been highly focused on unsheltered homelessness, as unsheltered homelessness has grown so significantly across the United States. So for us, it really was about kind of new formula, big impact, and we knew coming out of Houston that we had done something pretty incredible with that 60% reduction in overall homelessness and 70% reduction in unsheltered homelessness in about a 4-year period. But we wanted to see if that could be replicated in other cities. And we also understood that while we had a bit of a playbook, a formula here, that conditions were constantly shifting, and that there were particular local conditions. And so we wanted to see if this was kind of an adaptable playbook. And we always want to continue to innovate in the field. And we're really proud to say that we've worked in lots of cities now across the country where we're seeing similar success, despite, the national trends where we're actually seeing homelessness, grow in several places, and unsheltered homelessness in particular. So, Dallas has seen incredible reductions, completely reversed their trajectory. They were kind of on an uphill trend, and now have significant reductions each year, and are, have just closed the entire downtown area by rehousing everyone who's sleeping on the streets in downtown.
Quick question. So how long has Dallas implemented the program?
So Dallas began implementing the program in 2021.
Okay.
And so started seeing those reductions within a couple of years, and have continued to kind of amplify or ramp up their strategy. Obviously, the scale in Dallas is pretty substantial. When we started, there were over 1,900 individuals sleeping on the streets on any given night there, so let alone those in shelter. So a pretty significant challenge. New Orleans, we've been working in since 2023, and the aim there was to close all of the encampments within the inner core of New Orleans, and then work to maintain that closure. And this is a really dynamic environment that includes the French Quarter and some of these other spaces. So it's been incredible to work in partnership with the City of New Orleans to drive that work forward, and they're also seeing significant reductions in unsheltered homelessness. We're currently working in Atlanta, and Indianapolis, and you can see that there are new cities kind of really leaning in to adopt this model. And what's so exciting about that is we're getting to test this in different markets under different conditions across the country, Tulsa, included, which is really exciting. In every scenario here, Clutch is really a tool that is, in aid or in support to the city, to the service providers, to the funders, both public and private, and the aim is always a collective impact initiative that coalesces everyone's efforts and really takes targeted action to drive reductions. What that means, though, for us at Clutch is that we aren't just planners. We also support kind of field implementation. So we work from the boardrooms all the way deep into the encampments. The team at Clutch kind of has a variety of skills. I have a background of serving as special assistant to the mayor for homeless initiatives in Houston. Understand government, kind of worked in some of those higher levels, really worked to support leadership and planning and some of the associated strategy. Others on our team have deep experience in the field. They're in the trenches with our outreach workers, with our, transporting people, kind of helping to really drive implementation. And the aim here is to bring everything that we've learned and all of the shortcuts directly to community, and to impart that knowledge, and to help build the local capacities. So the goal here is not to do this once, but to really leave a community in a position with, immense capacity to continue and sustain the trajectory that we help communities achieve. So I thought it was important to talk a little bit about how Clutch came to Tulsa, and just wanted to appreciate that part of what made that possible was that Tulsa was so primed for action, right, as a result of all of this foundational work that had taken place. So it was, I think, like so many places, and I would say Houston included, there was kind of an alignment, right, of the stars. And so I think first acknowledging that there was incredible foundational work that took place for years ahead of 2024 to position a way home for Tulsa and Housing Solutions. This, creating that backbone organization, having a coalition of homeless service providers kind of organized, is one of the kind of essential prerequisites to begin transformation of your system. And so that was an incredible gift, because in so many other communities we're having to actually start there and build that foundation before we can get deep into the work. And then I know, there were all sorts of other activities that took place within the kind of public and private spheres, namely with the 3H task force, that kind of helped to coalesce those larger interests around a set of strategies, kind of providing some targeted direction and how to kind of, wield this incredible foundation toward achieving particular ends. And then, of course, as a new administration came in, there was kind of renewed energy, executive orders. You, as council, began participating in those same activities to position resources in support of kind of new strategies that came out of that 3H task force activity. So I just want to appreciate all of this took place. And so Clutch was positioned to kind of come in to help kind of further drive this convergence of the public and private efforts. And so we were invited here by the business community. And really the goal was to take all of that energy and all of that foundation and try to provide a clearer path for how to eliminate street sleeping in its entirety. I mean, that was of interest to the business community and to the larger public. And so we set out in partnership with Housing Solutions, in partnership with the city itself, to analyze the homeless data from the Homeless Management Information System, and I'm going to provide you with the results of that analysis today so we can go into some depth there. But really the aim was to say, how far away are you from achieving that particular goal? And how might we take advantage of the Safe Move Tulsa initiative and expand and accelerate it to drive this work forward at a faster pace and kind of in line with the executive order and the vision that the city had already established. And so that became just a really important part of this process. As we came in, and you can see kind of the timing, this all happened quite rapidly, and this is where I think the stars really aligned. You as council approved the $6 million for Safe Move Tulsa. We presented this proposal for how to leverage that investment to the business community, the Tulsa Leadership Council. They elected to form as a council and to commit to the $4 million to help accelerate and expand this effort. And, there was a recognition that this wouldn't ideally be a one-phased activity, but a multi-phased activity that would lead to kind of permanent change and the elimination of street sleeping in the city of Tulsa ultimately. That positioned us then right away in September to get into the field with the Housing Solutions team and with some of the service providers and really start to test and practice moving individuals directly into housing as we positioned all of the resources for kind of a more formal launch in November. So as far as an overall process, our Clutch process, you can see that when we come to community, when we're invited in these particular scenarios, regardless of who invites us, we're always going to need to come into alignment with the lead agency of the continuum of care of the service provider sector, and always in partnership with the local jurisdiction who's feeling the pressure and has the authorities. And so we did just that. And our typical process is to do exactly what we've done. Because Tulsa was so primed, we've been able to do that in a really accelerated way, which is really exciting. So we moved pretty rapidly from the system modeling to designing a ramp-up plan to really working to galvanize public and private support to go to ground and begin testing. And of course now, since November, we've been in a phase where we're really looking ahead, of course driving on the implementation, but looking ahead to secure both the immediate and long-term funding that's needed to get to the entire goal and to scale the system itself. So I want to walk you through a little bit of each of those steps so that you can just follow along in terms of the logic. And I apologize for some of the formatting on the slides, so hopefully we can get that corrected, for record. But the exercise of system modeling is always done first as a way to get a more comprehensive understanding. I think it's always important to want to understand, if we're going to make investments in the system, which investments are going to have the most impact and how much impact will they have? How close will they get us, or how far will they get us? And then what is it going to take ultimately to sustain those activities? Usually, homelessness in any community is not a static set of individuals. Homelessness represents, an experience that people are unfortunately having kind of on a continuous basis. Not the same people, but rather the community itself is experiencing a set of people who are falling into homelessness each year. And so we want to use our system modeling to really try to understand what is the annual need, how many people become homeless each year in this system, and how much capacity do we have, and how do we build the capacity to meet that demand? So the inputs for the system modeling are really rooted in understanding that annual demand, and we're fortunate to have a homeless management information system and a variety of different reports that we can pull that gives us kind of a different dimensions of this. So we don't just rely on a point in time count, but rather we're really looking more deeply into the system and looking at actual utilization of services and service and utilization patterns, and then also performance. We also then look at a variety of kind of data performance considerations in order to understand everyone coming into the system needs to go out, and what are their pathways out, and then how much of each of those pathways do we have, and how much of each of those pathways do we need. So that really leads us into the system capacity analysis. And we can even put an associated cost to that, and put that into a financial model so we can begin to anticipate both what will it cost to ramp up or to scale that system, and then what will it cost to sustain it. The kind of tool or the exercise itself is based on a couple of key conditions for reducing homelessness that are really pretty universal. So I've said it, but I'll say it again. People flowing into homelessness must flow out, right? So we don't want people stuck in homelessness, kind of languishing inside the shelter systems. And so we need to think about every front door must have a back door. And interestingly enough, inside the data, very consistently across the country, is actually the majority of individuals who experience homelessness each year actually can exit with light touch supports. But there are always kind of a number of individuals who are getting stuck, and that accumulation of those individuals kind of develops long-term homelessness, and that can become quite overwhelming for communities. And so what we want to try to think about is what's the combination of kind of exit pathways, what's the average length of time that folks would need inside our system in order to access that pathway, and how do we actually calibrate so that with the shelter beds that we have, we can move everyone through that system without getting stuck. And I think the goal is to minimize the expansion of shelter beds whenever possible, because you still have to resource the exit pathways no matter how many shelter beds you have. And so we want to find the right balance. And it's not just about the number of beds, it's also about the quality of those beds or who those beds can serve, right? So there's lots of dimensions in that. But generally, from a formulaic perspective, we want to think about each bed needs to serve multiple people a year, and we want to calibrate our system so that we have enough beds and enough exit pathways that everyone flowing in can flow out. The second piece here then is that we oftentimes have to separate our long-term homeless, those folks who have been homeless for longer than a year, from the annual inflow that's coming, because most of that annual inflow can receive a light touch if we have that light touch positioned. But many of those individuals who have been stuck in homelessness are going to require a deeper intervention. And so we kind of tease those things apart in the modeling, because we're going to kind of model different pathways for each of those. What's nice is, if we're very good at responding to all of that inflow, we can actually eliminate, right, the accumulation of those individuals who are experiencing long-term homelessness. And then if we're good at targeting those individuals, we can actually eliminate long-term homelessness altogether, or individuals experiencing long-term homelessness. And so that's what we're modeling for, is what are the scenarios, what are the possibilities for how we get to a system that can accomplish these things. So I want to show you kind of a slide that animates this. It's a little bit crude, but I think it does the job. So very often, when we see an accumulation of individuals, right, or our shelters begin to overflow, our natural instinct, right, when we see people in crisis and vulnerable people outside, is to say, well, gosh, we need to build kind of a bigger crisis system. And we kind of think of it as like, I need a bigger funnel, right, that can catch more people. So the problem is that if we grow the funnel at the top, but we don't grow, right, the funnel at the bottom, then the funnel begins to fill up, because there's annual inflow that keeps coming, right? And so that's how we end up with an accumulation of long-term stayers in our system, and then our shelter beds are serving one person a year, and when they serve one person a year, it actually costs more than it would just to support an individual to return to housing with the supports that they need, right? So we're really kind of out of balance in terms of, good and efficient investment. So this means that even though our instinct is to grow the shelter to try to alleviate the pressure, it really only alleviates the pressure for a moment, right? And then it actually allows for kind of an accumulated pressure to build within the system. So what the data kind of tells us is that in many ways we need to think about inverting the funnel. Because what we want to do is try to reduce the number of people that need to come in by helping as many people avoid entry as possible or resolve very quickly. And then what we would rather do is grow the exit pathways. And when you grow those exit pathways, we can eventually kind of shrink and then eliminate long stayers and then kind of recalibrate our system back to just meet that annual demand. So, as we started to get into the system modeling analysis here in Tulsa, we were able to look at inflow and over a multiple year period. So we went all the way back to calendar year 2022, calendar year 2023, calendar year 2024, because we performed this in the fall, in August, I guess, of 2025. And so we wanted to look at both, what's the inflow as we know it today, but also how reliable is that inflow in terms of how, is it holding steady? Or are you seeing kind of big increases in inflow, because that would affect what we model too. And so this is a reflection of that data. And what we saw here in the data on inflow is that inflow has been pretty steady over these calendar years. And this represents a period of time when the economics, I'm going to say, have been pretty gnarly, right? The economic conditions, post-COVID, we saw huge increases in rent. We saw lots of aid kind of come to an end, and we did see a lot more inflow into homelessness in cities across the country. So this is, I think, a really good reflection of what modern, what realistic inflow looks like, at least for the time being. The other thing that we noticed in this data is that black or gray bottom there at the bar at the bottom really represents what we call long-term homelessness. And note how it also is remaining relatively flat. So what this suggests to us is that you're not able at this juncture to keep up with the demand for inflow. And while you are moving some individuals out of homelessness and even long-term homelessness, right? Some of those individuals experiencing long-term homelessness, because you're not keeping up with inflow, new folks are falling into long-term homelessness, right? And so that suggests that you're under-resourced and that that it's likely that you're going to have to add resources in order to kind of surge to respond to all of that long-term homelessness. And you're going to have to make sure you have enough resources to respond to all of your annual demand, or you're going to continue to accumulate individuals in long-term homelessness. So the overall kind of inflow picture here is about 3,100 individuals inflow into single adults, right? Enter homelessness annually in Tulsa. There's about 500 kind of individuals that sit in that like persistently stuck category. And the most interesting part about the inflow data is that 74% are first-time homeless. And that's consistent kind of year to year. And so that really helps us appreciate that it's not the same individuals that are, coming into homelessness, leaving homelessness, and then coming back into homelessness, but actually it's largely new individuals. It also represents good news in that individuals who have never experienced homelessness before, they have histories, if we intervene early, where we can really leverage that, recent kind of instability to help return folks to housing stability quickly, right? If you saw a much lower number of first-time homeless, what it would suggest is that your inflow includes a lot of folks who have had multiple experiences of homelessness, and that would point us in a different direction in terms of the level of intervention required to help your annual inflow stabilize. The other part of the data that was really interesting is that while 74% are first-time homeless, many are spending almost 2 months or over 2 months in shelter without ever receiving any additional kind of remedy. So they end up leaving after 2 months, but you're seeing kind of higher than you would expect rates of return, likely because there was, no light touch intervention provided whatsoever. So they're spending more time in shelter than they really should, right? And they're returning at higher rates than we would want. And so what that really represented for us in all of this analysis is that there's some kind of level of system design flaw here that's causing the shelter beds to fill and overflow, and that's what's kind of driving to an increase in sleeping outside, an increase in encampments, inappropriate use of public spaces, and also kind of some of the migration that we see throughout the day across the city in search of supports. And this, I just want to appreciate, when homeless response systems are kind of coming together, there is no master plan, right? Each of these are individual organizations that are stepping in to do good work, to respond to some crisis or to some need in front of them. So when we look at this kind of in its totality and we call it a system, no one ever intentionally designed it to be a system. So, we call it a system design flaw, and it is, except that it's no one's fault, right? But I think that's the value of the system modeling and of the analysis as a system, is it allows us to appreciate that everybody can be doing incredible work, right, inside their own organizations, but if we don't put those pieces together in the right way, kind of, calibrated, we can't achieve the ultimate goal that we're looking for, right? Which is to reduce homelessness altogether, and particularly to keep people from sleeping outside as a first threshold. So, from this analysis, we were able to kind of generate in the planning process some critical questions that we wanted to explore scenarios on. So the first, relative to the annual inflow, was this question of, can the system meet the rehousing needs of this entire kind of annual inflow population more effectively and more efficiently? So do 81% of the people need to be in shelter for 2 months only to leave, right, without receiving any further intervention? Can we make that 30 days? Can we make that 15 days, right? So those were some interesting questions. And can the supports that we provide, if that's in fact the right way to do this, can that actually reduce the number of people who are returning? And as you can see, for those 81% of folks who only use shelter and stay about 2 months, 31% end up returning within 6 months back to that environment. So can we do better to help kind of reduce the number of individuals that are showing back up within that a pretty short period of time by providing, right, a better intervention? When it came to long-term homelessness, I think the critical question that we needed to answer was, how aggressive can we be to surge investment to address long-term homelessness, kind of balanced with our investment to meet annual inflow to prevent new long-term homelessness, right? So we needed to kind of consider those two things in combination. And so I just want to appreciate that under this model, as you can imagine, is a lot of calculation. HUD has developed a tool that lives inside the HUD HDX environment. And so, it's this tool that allows us to kind of, all of the data that's provided to the federal government is kind of entered into this system. And so it gives us the ability to kind of run very complicated scenarios. What I'm representing for you in this chart is a big simplification of all of those complex calculations. So what we do inside this tool, in essence, is we load what are all of the potential pathways out of homelessness, and then we assign relative percentages and lengths of time, right, associated for each of those pathways. And you can see that we assign different percentages to the annual inflow than we do to the long-term homeless, because the long-term homeless, for example, we are not likely, in most cases, to resolve an individual experiencing long-term homelessness with a light touch intervention, right? They're gonna need a deeper intervention. And whereas most of the individuals for annual inflow need a light touch intervention, and really a very small number of people may need a deeper intervention. And so, we kind of calibrate. There's all sorts of like pathways that go into the accumulation of these percentages, which is why I'm saying it's a simplification of the chart under all of this. But as you can see, we even contemplate, there will be instances when individuals will go to directly to a rapid rehousing resolution, or go to a rapid rehousing resolution and need to bridge to a supportive housing, a longer, deeper intervention. And so we kind of assign relative percentages against that. The other dimension here, it's both a need, but it's also about kind of realistic expectations around capacity. So almost anyone experiencing homelessness would absolutely benefit from the Cadillac pathway, right? We don't have enough Cadillac pathways, and frankly, we can't afford, there's not a city in this country that can afford to provide that. And so it would be unrealistic to present a model where we just give everybody the Cadillac, the permanent supportive housing, right? And so what we have to do is really think about how much capacity do we have, how much is realistic relative to the need, and how do we build in kind of the safety nets within the system to provide some progressive engagement? Meaning, if we can work to transition someone and first try 12 months and get folks stable in 12 months, and only really extend or move those individuals to the Cadillac or the deepest interventions once we kind of know more definitively, we can likely, I don't want to say invest less. We can likely spread our dollars, right, across more individuals and lower the overall cost, making it much more realistic to build a system that can respond to everyone, and not leave anyone out of that equation. And so, we were kind of considering all of these factors as we were thinking through the pathways. What the model kind of spits out on the other side of this, then once we've loaded all of the pathways, we've loaded all of the existing capacity, it can then tell us, what do we have, what do we need in order to meet particular milestones, and do we need this forever, or is this kind of one-time money or one-time investment? And so what you can see in this chart, and again, this is a representation, is we modeled that the number of emergency shelter beds are adequate today if, right, we can get investments in one-time assistance and kind of the time-limited stabilization and some longer-term supportive housing. So early interventions and deeper interventions, if we can accomplish all of the green there, we can service annual inflow using the emergency shelter beds that we have ongoing, right? And avoid the accumulation of long-term homeless. In this particular scenario, we were modeling for how do we rehouse all long-term homeless by 2028 and meet annual inflow of 3,100 single adult households so that we don't accumulate any more long-term homeless throughout this period. So that was kind of what drove this particular chart, and that's where kind of based on the timelines, that's where we landed as the scenario. And so this chart here kind of gives you a different representation of kind of how the modeling works, the average cost per person, and then ultimately the annual cost to sustain this system, right? And so you've probably heard that number of $30 million. This is where the $30 million comes from. And so the rapid resolution, as you can see, approximately 80% of annual inflow, an average cost of about $2,000 per person per year. And the deeper time-limited interventions, about 20%, at an average cost of about $25,000 per person per year. So from,
Sorry, did you want to ask?
No, that's okay, we can get through the whole thing, but I'm just trying to, in my brain, remember what slide we're on, because I want to come back to it.
Okay.
So when we completed the system modeling process, the next activity then is to say, okay, we've modeled what we want to do, but now we have to kind of translate that into a practical ramp-up strategy. And part of the challenge here is that there are all sorts of other kind of conditions and priorities that we have to layer in now, or realities that we have to layer in between a model of what we want to accomplish and the kind of reality of how we get to, right, that optimized state that we've modeled for. And so the general framework that emerged from the model is that first, that annual inflow, that new to homeless, we need to focus on immediate interventions, and rapid resolution has to be kind of the new front door offer. Instead of having folks wait in shelter on a list for some housing intervention that's not likely to come, right? So that kind of became the framework. The second piece of that is, and I think it's really evident, right? We have to target deeper interventions in a really urgent way to individuals who are experiencing long-term homelessness. And for that very small subset of individuals who, what we would call kind of have isolated high needs, have very complex cases, we need to work with our mental health system, with our hospitals, with our law enforcement partners to get those individuals into higher levels of care and to make sure that there's continuity of care and that those individuals are appropriately discharged. It may be that those individuals, after receiving some acute institutional care, do come in to one of our rehousing interventions, our deeper interventions and transition. It's more often likely that they need assisted living, nursing home care, other rehabilitative care as a more appropriate long-term intervention. Luckily, it's a very small number of cases, but those cases, what we would call kind of the outliers within the framework, and we need to create some dedicated capacity to support those individuals. So here are some of the local kind of priorities and conditions that we had to layer in to help kind of drive the phasing for the implementation. So there were some clear priorities, ending street sleeping, eliminating encampments, reducing the necessity of having to migrate to receive services, expanding behavioral health partnerships and integration into the homelessness response system. And there was certainly an urgency to enhance public safety. All of these things kind of are intertwined. There were also some conditions that we had to be mindful of. So we had this incredible opportunity in that the mayor and council just launched Safe Move Tulsa. So we had a platform from which we could kind of anchor to, right, and drive on. So we had this opportunity to expand and accelerate. But we also knew that the sector needed time to build staffing and skills capacity. And that's particularly challenging because there's been a lot of whiplash in our sector, right, over the last 5 years. And so here we are again, seizing opportunities to expand and accelerate, but also trying to be kind of as thoughtful as we could about how aggressive can we be given the necessity that we're going to have to ramp up. So even if we could get all the resource that we needed, we couldn't ramp the capacity in our system to use all of that resource in year one, for example. So we had to think about a phased strategy. I think there were some immediate opportunities, and I just want to specifically call out with YWCA. They are not a traditional homeless services case management provider, but there was an opportunity as a result of some of that whiplash and shifts in funding, and there was instant capacity available. So while not a perfect fit, this was an example of an opportunity and a condition where we could lean in to kind of starting right away, knowing that wasn't going to be the forever answer. and we could move some, that we would work to move some pieces around ultimately. So it was like, it was about, what was in front of us and available, how to use what we had, how to try to create space to ramp, but also how do we meet the urgency. The other piece here is that Archer Corridor, for better or worse, right, serves a majority of the single adults. So it just created a natural environment. And the Tulsa Day Center in particular, inside that, the Archer Corridor, as the daytime partner, they really became the anchor for where we were going to drive a consolidation of rapid resolution services with, within these existing facilities. So that's not, we don't want to drive everyone to Archer Corridor, right? But this was a natural starting place within the system itself. And then I'd be kind of remiss not to, acknowledge that the other condition that was in play is there are shifting federal funding priorities. And there is, right, a continued threat of destabilization because Tulsa, like so many communities, relies so heavily on those federal funds as the foundation for the homelessness response system. And so the other part of the equation here was, how do we also help introduce more local investment to help stabilize that system so that we are positioned to rearrange the federal resources to fill our gaps, right, without losing those federal resources because we couldn't meet those priorities. So those are all the, conditions that we were trying to manage for within the ramp-up strategy. So that's, so given all of those conditions, where we landed, right, going back to that original model, how do we eliminate long-term homelessness by 2028 and meet annual demand by that time period? We knew we were gonna need to do a ramp up over, 3 phases, roughly 3 years or so. So in year 1, what we identified was a goal to house 300 of those long-term homeless with deeper interventions, and then drive on 1,000 rapid resolutions. So how do we get to 1,000 folks that are, in the system and positioned for a light touch intervention so we can start to create some movement, particularly within Archer Corridor. And then in phase 2, we want to build on that, so we want to sustain that capacity and expand to reach more long-term homeless and more of that annual inflow. And we needed to begin introducing in phase 2 the ability to stabilize a small number of individuals who need longer term supports. So we don't have a voucher, so we can't promise a long-term permanent supportive housing unit. But what we can do is anticipate that some folks are gonna need more time to stabilize. And so we can build in those resources to do that, which is what's represented in kind of the blue at the top. So then in phase 3, you can see this would be getting us to full scale so that we can meet that expectation by 2028. 2,500 individuals being rapidly resolved each year, 660 deep interventions to accommodate that inflow and the remaining long-term homelessness, plus some additional resources to stabilize individuals longer if in fact that is needed. And then you'll see kind of the annual ongoing is to sustain that capacity. And that capacity is what the $30 million represents. So from this point forward, what we then did is moved all of this, right, under the heading, right, of Safe Move Tulsa. Now, not as a single strategy, but as an expanded multi-phased strategy to completely eliminate street sleeping. And so, I'm sure you're all aware of the website that's launched, and so that's, some of what you're seeing here, right? The primary focus out of the gate in terms of how we're wielding those resources that I just described to you is we're doing a lot of targeted encampment decommissioning work, permanently closing encampments by offering those individuals with long-term homelessness those deep interventions. And then the rapid resolution is the part of the strategy that helps sustain, right, or maintain the ability to prevent new street sleeping going forward. We're really focused on getting people to stability faster, so organizing all of the incredible capacity that's doing this work and giving those caseworkers the tools to deliver on those rapid resolutions. We're really interested in deepening partnerships with the mental health system and are in conversations now around the complex cases. And there's so much good work that's happening in Tulsa around that. And so it's just, we're really working to figure out how to fully integrate those pieces and do some targeted work in support, right, of Safe Move Tulsa itself. But it goes beyond just the mental health care. It's all sorts of new partners. It's public safety and first responders. It's the, downtown partners. It's neighborhoods. Every time there's an encampment that's decommissioned, there's an opportunity to engage, council and neighborhoods and other groups that have interest in helping to support kind of activation or a return of public spaces for general use. I think preventing street sleeping and making sure encampments don't come back has really required us to come into partnership in a more targeted way with law enforcement, and really has brought law enforcement, homeless outreach, and public safety partners together. And, I think a lot of folks have been demanding enforcement around homelessness for a long time, and oftentimes that gets translated into its simplest form into like a policy action, like an ordinance, and then law enforcement. But very practically, you can't accomplish enforcement when it comes to this, this crisis issue. That enforcement, and I think when the broader public is asking for enforcement, the appropriate translation is, the ask is, please get these vulnerable individuals the care that they need, and please help make my streets safe for everyone, including these individuals. And so these partnerships really represent, I think, exactly what enforcement can look like, which is, how do I have a tool that allows me to engage an individual, offer them exactly what they need, a pathway out of homelessness, help them avoid sleeping outside, and equip, right, our law enforcement partners with that toolkit in partnership with us, so that if a new individual shows up, everyone, right, is getting the same offer and the same access. And we want to build toward that. So the kind of overall blueprint is this phase one. The cost was $10 million. There was another $1 million in play within our partnership at YWCA that's leveraged here to represent the $11 million. So $6 million approximately from the city and some other public funds, $4 million in private funding, and then another $1 million kind of in-kind partnerships. And then the phase 2 and phase 3 budgets really are represented here at 20 and 30 million, based on the chart that I showed you earlier. And as you can see, we're really aiming here to serve 300 people in this first year, deep interventions, 1,000 people, rapid resolutions. And you can see on the website, and I'm sure you'll hear from Emily, a continuous update, right, on our progress toward that end. We're well into the encampment work, and the rapid resolution work has just started in January, despite all of the winter challenges that those providers have had to navigate. So I'm just really grateful for the incredible work that's happening there, and we're really excited to start reporting on the progress against that 1,000 in the coming weeks. So as of now, 68 out of 300, 5 encampments closed, lots of trash cleared out of these encampments, which I think just speaks to how kind of rooted some of these folks were, right, in their outside living arrangements. And all the more reason to kind of validate that getting folks out of those conditions is healthy for them and healthy for the community. Lots of partnerships in order to make this happen, I would say growing every day. And especially as you scale, it really will ultimately bring the entire service network kind of under the umbrella of of this larger kind of transformative initiative. And the last thing that I'll kind of leave us with, and I think you've all seen this already as well, but just a more detailed breakdown of the budget for what it would take to sustain the 10 million for phase 1, the phase two 20 million and the phase three scaled 30 million. So just a little bit more of a detailed budget breakdown.
And when Mandy says that you guys have seen it, that came in the email that I sent yesterday.
Right,
that day.
okay.
So,
I was gonna say, I don't know if we've gotten to pour
yeah.
through it more. That's helpful though, it's like the programmatic breakdown. Are you?
That's it?
Yes, Counselor Ballas.
All right.
Oh, I have questions too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Next.
Yeah, just go around the table.
Yeah,
Cute.
you've got questions?
Okay, but I raised my hand for like eager students.
We got you.
No, I'm just teasing. Okay, thank you, this is all super helpful. I think one of my initial inquiries, and maybe you can tell me if this isn't really an apples to apples comparison, some of us had started to dig into a bit of like PETA homework in Oklahoma City, and the scale of that is, they have a comparable context, obviously. In many ways, though I know some of their infrastructure for this work looks different, I kind of had like a twofold inquiry related to that, and then I think I have 4 questions total. But so for OKC, where would you say, kind of in this continuum, where would you say they are in relation to us? Just so I understand, because I have kind of their budget and revenue stream breakdowns for 2023 through 25,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure how much that
Yep.
looks like ours.
So, I mean, Oklahoma City goes through the same activities, the
Right.
system modeling activities.
Right.
And so what Oklahoma City has not done, that you all have done, is conceived a full ramp-up strategy to
Okay.
scale. They were not, so we have the modeling and background, but they were not positioned
Right.
to consider kind of the full strategy. They're further away.
Oh,
And so what they did is they said, we need to take a first big bite, a first big step. And so the Key to Home partnership launched with an encampment rehousing initiative, the goal of rehousing 500 individuals over 2 years out of encampments. And so that was kind of their first bite at all of this. And so in some ways, if you think about your phase 1 is a bigger bite.
yeah, so, but where are
Because
they
of the
right now? Are they, well, going off of that, but are OKC, so for instance, when I look at their 2023 to 25 expenditures and their revenue streams, they're showing over the course of 2 years, spending about $30 million, and that the bulk of the dollars that went to that is from federal funding sources.
You're looking at their entire system, not
Okay.
just the initiative.
Okay, but you're saying like the city initiative, like, I'm trying to understand, because they have the city putting in $4 million to obviously this much bigger system. I'm trying to understand, because contextually, it's like we're trying to build up and scale up into a large system. We have a lot of existing
Yeah.
players at the table. We have federal funds in other places that maybe aren't almost the $20 million of federal funds they have, I'm not sure. I guess I'm trying to understand, like, because I'm seeing how their funding is braided, and ours, or what's been put before us, feels really different, and but again, I know I'm probably not talking apples to apples here,
Yeah.
so help me understand.
Okay, so the analysis that you're looking at
Yeah.
is like, what are we spending on the whole system? Housing Solutions has that for your system.
Great,
Inside the system model,
Mhm.
when we put in what's your existing capacity,
yeah,
that's those dollars
okay,
in your existing capacity. What you're seeing in these budgets is what's the additional capacity that's
That
needed.
we have to add.
What's the gap, right?
So-
These are the gaps.
so are there similar things going on, for example, you're saying for Oklahoma City, if you were gonna ramp up, they'd be looking at similar
Yes.
cost models?
Yeah.
Okay, and then, you mentioned, okay, like, a lot of the presentation you were talking about, and I'm just thinking through the cost and the ramp-up side of this, like, how critical, right, and downstream, of course, cost saving, those light touches are early on, and we've started with these very, much more costly, heavy lift things for people who have been maybe more chronically homeless, like these really complex encampment situations, people who may need permanent supportive wraparound services. Is this just like a, because I can imagine some of your all's consulting recommendations may not be one size fits all, but have we started in like the right order? I'm curious, because it seems like if the most cost effective things are these light touches, and I know that we're starting to dig into that work more with our kind of service corridor, but we started with these really maybe highly visible but heavy lift items. Is that an okay foot to start on? Is that?
Yeah, I think, let me talk about Tulsa and then let me compare to Oklahoma City
Yeah,
to
that's
give
great.
you that,
Thank you.
comparison. So in Tulsa, the strategy for phase one is actually to move on both of those right out of the gate. So to go 300, deep interventions, start targeting some of those long stayers. And you're right, we are targeting some visible locations because we want to be able to prove to the
course,
public that
it
these
works.
investments are going to produce results, right?
Totally.
But simultaneously, in your phase one, we're activating these rapid resolutions within the Archer corridor. So to try to begin these light touches to try to kind of slow inflow. In Oklahoma City, they kind of were up against a different combination of activities. So in Oklahoma City, what we started with is that there was a growing population of individuals who were unsheltered, who were chronically homeless. So when we looked at that data, you were seeing this, this trend line going up, 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 up. And so we said, we have to get in and fix that as a first phase. And then as a second phase, we have to start to tackle inflow. And part of that is they just have some design differences, right?
Okay.
And so they've accomplished the first goal, which is they've dramatically reduced the number of chronically unsheltered individuals. Because of the way their system is designed, overall unsheltered homelessness has remained the same because their waiting room, their front door is outside, based on the way things are designed. So now, we're starting in Oklahoma City, the kind of second piece of this, which is we have to begin these rapid resolutions to begin to bring down the number of people that are experiencing homelessness at any given time by helping folks resolve faster and avoid being outside altogether.
Can I
So-
just ask a contextual question?
Yeah.
So when we're talking about Tulsa and Oklahoma City, right, comparatively, are you talking about
Put that on the paper.
Oklahoma City proper and Tulsa proper, or are you talking about metropolitan?
So I'm trying to make, the homeless response system is broken up into what we call continuum of cares. And so
Right.
that's our data sets, that homeless management information system is dictated by whatever the boundary of the continuum of care. So in this particular case, your continuum of cares are both city-based continuum of cares.
Okay.
So we're only talking about within that.
The
But
municipal.
to appreciate, you also, I think, share similar qualities in that there are not robust services in your outlying areas or in your kind of immediate region. And so many individuals who experience homelessness in those are going to be brought or come into these urban environments where the services exist. And luckily, the data captures that, but I just want to appreciate that.
And then, sorry, Phil, did you have a follow-up? Sorry, I'd like to defer to him real quick before I
Yeah.
steal my
Yeah, that's
question and
fine.
time back.
Yeah, I still
Yeah.
can't get my head around what you're saying between Oklahoma City and Tulsa, because Tulsa has 300 that cost us 6 million, and Oklahoma City has 500 that cost them, just the city, 4 million. So
Yeah, I
where,
agree. That was.
That's
That-
where the numbers don't.
Oh,
don't
I'm
go.
sorry. It didn't, the 500 was a $13 million initiative in Oklahoma City. The city put up 4 million
Yeah,
into that,
right.
right? But there were other sources that got layered into that,
Right.
that
Well,
created
I'm
the
just-
13 million.
yeah, but I'm just trying to figure out how we layer more sources in so that we can pay less and get as equal of a bang. So they got 200 more people housed for less money
Sure.
than we did.
Yeah.
Sure.
They have different housing.
But that's also where that's why I was
Available.
curious about, or felt confused by
No,
the
they don't have
federal.
different housing available, they're just using different
Yeah, they're
funds.
using funding differently. That's where, because I think when
How do
we've
we
talked
use
about.
those different funds?
Yeah, because when we've talked about going into a phase two, per his point,
Sure.
I think the way the conversation has taken shape makes it sound like the city better come forward with $20 million or $30 million, which, and then I'm looking at
Absolutely,
Oklahoma
yes.
City, and it makes it look like the city's continue to put in
They're doing their
about that.
share.
Yeah, they're doing
Mhm.
their share, like, obviously this is incumbent on the city to do, and you see significant other funding streams, and so I'm trying to understand how they arrived at.
Yeah, okay. So
That.
Yeah.
let me try to help.
Okay.
In any given moment, and you guys can appreciate this,
Yeah.
there's one-time money that you can go grab
Yep,
to do
of
things,
course.
right? And so Oklahoma City started this initiative when there was a lot more one-time money to go and
Yes.
grab. So they still put general revenue on the table, which is really great. But they also had access to go grab ARPA funding and some one-time monies that lived at the county, that was, we had, at the time, we had the local housing authority and the state housing authority who were not in shortfall at that time, and so they could dedicate some vouchers toward this activity. Right, the conditions just supported that, but those were just one-time commitments that were opportunistic, right?
So now we should be on a level playing field because they don't have the opportunity to tap those one-time funds.
That's
unless
exactly
they-
right.
They, or we find different sources.
Right, I mean, every city is up against the challenge here of, we're not seeing the federal resources grow the way they used to grow, which was our primary source. So everybody has to contemplate, how do we come up with the local revenue sources to respond to this issue, or not, right? Or we just kind of suffer under the weight and we do the best we can, with what we have. Those are the choices in front of us. And so, I think the private and the philanthropic community are partners in all of this.
Totally do, yeah.
But they're oftentimes catalytic partners, and they're certainly not partners that are going to, in my experience, are interested in making long-term commitments to kind of hold the system up beyond something that feels reasonable, right? And so I think this is the rub in any community, is to figure out, we have to pay if we want to solve the problem. We just got to figure out how to pay for it. And I think the demand is always going to be, does the private funding community write the check? Or do we increase taxes, for example, to pay? Either way, everybody's writing a check, right?
Yeah.
The question is just,
On what end?
the mechanism of that.
And if I could just add real quick to that. So we released that funding analysis, and I'm happy to share it again. But part of it also is, this plan only works if existing capacity remains. So the shelter capacity that we have, if that decreases, there's more people outside. And the rehousing capacity that already exists in the system has to remain. So, 40% of our system is funded by individuals, corporations, philanthropy. If that decreases, then the other public funding source, that means less shelter beds, less rehousing, less case management capacity. So that's an important part to kind of layer in here. Oklahoma City, some of the federal dollars through the COC actually flowed through the city. So the $8.6 million that Away Home for Tulsa has worked so hard to get from HUD, those dollars actually flowed through the city, where in Tulsa, it's organized a little bit differently, that those dollars are direct to those organizations, even though we apply. So just want to, this is where we talk about like disruptions on the federal level. Like, if we don't see that sustained revenue from the federal level, that brings in more than 40% of funds in our community, I think this gap gets larger. And if philanthropy and individuals don't continue to contribute the way that they do, again, the gap gets even bigger. So we're kind of baking in, as Mandy said, in the system right now, those funding levels will sustain. And we've seen regular commitments, but we're not anticipating any new federal large-scale investments unless like things in Congress and appropriations change significantly. And growing systemic philanthropic dollars has been something that we're just like not seeing. As Mandy said, talking with a lot of philanthropy, corporate individuals, they're willing to do sometimes short-term, one-time investments. But if we're trying to pull $30 million out of the philanthropic community or individuals that are already contributing tens of millions of dollars annually, it's just, those wallets only go so far.
So, I'll try to wrap up my questions really fast, because I know other people have a bunch of questions too, but I still have two more. So, related to what you were just mentioning with shifting, I'm also thinking about the imminent cuts to Medicaid. Is that modeled into, because I'm thinking through, if we upfront have started off with some heavy lift with some really high needs folks, who I'm guessing even after a year, I'm assuming many of them may need ongoing long-term care, and we maybe have this like kind of Medicaid cliff coming up. I'm just curious both, one, what it looks like or how it's modeled in, that we might have people who we've started with who aren't exiting a system of support within the next year or 2 years, I don't know. And then two, we also, like another headwind is like, if like this factor of if case management can't access Medicaid reimbursements for some of that care. I just wasn't sure if that's modeled into some of this or how we, or just as we think about another phase and having to identify dollars, that we have people right now that we could like, who need intensive care, because we haven't started with the lighter touch folks, and I know there's that concern, and I've heard, Emily share this of, if we don't at least maintain what we've started with, then we could lose traction, these people could end up, I don't want them to go back on the street, but these are people who might need wraparound case management for years, right?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges as a result of the kind of the shift in the federal funding priorities, it's a little bit hard to kind of figure it out.
Yeah.
So the way we kind of adjusted within the model is we said, there's not gonna be expansion of permanent supportive housing, right, on the horizon. And so we have what we have, and there is risk that could be destabilized. But we're gonna presume for now that those funding sources are in play. What we're going to do for the additional capacity that we need is we're gonna build it in here, not reliant on those other sources. And while we can't promise long-term vouchers because we don't have them, we can build in the expansion of the time-limited subsidies for that small subset. So basically, this ability to say, we know some people are gonna need more than 12 months of deep intervention, and so we'll build in the extra resource to do that within this model. If we can leverage Medicaid and other federal funding sources as they're shifting, that helps fill some of that gap, right? But it's, right now, there's no way to reliably say we can, and the only insulation that we could build into the model was to say, and we're not gonna anticipate the expansion of the use of those sources, but we are gonna rely on what we get now, and there's a risk in that too, right?
And I'll just add real quick, just on Medicaid. Medicaid in Oklahoma specifically doesn't really support like the housing stability-based case management.
Right.
So it's really important for those behavioral health services and substance use and healthcare services, right, so that we can provide them both. But like what YWCA is doing so fantastically.
Is it reimbursable?
It's not reimbursable at this time. We have some Medicaid providers that have been able to figure out at a small scale where they can maybe look at uncompensated care or other revenue where they can do it, but to actually get it scale, like, we're not in a situation like in Illinois where there's some direct Medicaid billing that can happen.
That's a policy change that could be pursued on the state level or through a state plan amendment, I would think.
We would love to, and some of those conversations right now, again, talking about like disruptions, like talking about Medicaid expansion and increasing burden at the state level right now is just.
Yeah, maybe not prudent.
Yeah.
And thank you though for saying that YWCA is doing it so fantastically. I wanted them to know they were perfect to me, even if the slide called them imperfect.
I wanted to clarify, when we met was.
Can you tell us more about what that meant?
Yeah, because I'm looking at Molly, and Molly is perfect, and her team is perfect,
They
but
are, yeah.
what YWCA, as, the disruption and staff has experienced in refugee population, again, it's a
They
different.
had to shift their case, I know.
And the intention when we were working with YWCA was a little bit of a different population initially, and so we have had to adjust, and YWCA has had to adjust in an incredible way. And so it's not the same as if they had 10 case managers who have been working with the homeless population for 10 years, and it's just like, okay, we add new clients. There is a growth in capacity, part of this that comes with it, and I'll say to Molly, it's really hard, but also, I was just talking to Molly, 2 of the people that they housed from the McDonald's encampment at the end of the year have now employed, both have been able to purchase vehicles and are well on their way to becoming sustainable. And so, again, for like imperfect and sort of its planning and design where we got there, the results that YWCA is getting in terms of the impact for these individuals is huge.
Thanks, I'll stop for now.
Counselor Director, we have 15 minutes. But thank you. I want to zone in on permanent supportive housing. Help me understand how we go from we need 1,200 units in your strategic plan, in the zero funded housing plan, to we're not going to get them. Is it because we don't have vouchers and that is permanent supportive housing? So that's the only route to permanent supportive housing, is building housing that takes a choice voucher, but because we don't have choice vouchers, that's a lockdown system now.
Well, I think just if we back up just a second, a permanent supportive housing intervention is delivered by having a non-time limited subsidy with intensive wraparound supports, and that doesn't have to be in a built building. We can go rent a unit today and bring that subsidy and bring that service package with that individual. And
So we still need 1,200 of those.
well, so I think that this goes back to the relative, the pathways that I was describing. So I think if you ask any service provider, right, doing this work, they would tell you almost everybody they encounter could benefit from that. What we had to do in the modeling exercise, right, is to start to get more realistic about if we can't get access to those kinds of resources, but we can't leave people languishing in homelessness and leave them accumulating outside, what can we do? And so what we decided to do was to say, we can move more people into housing on time-limited subsidies with the same wraparound supports that they get. And we can work really hard to stabilize many of those individuals within that period of time. And then some of those individuals might need longer. And then some of those individuals may ultimately end up in some of your existing permanent supportive housing because there is modest turnover that takes place each year. But that's really the best we can foresee. And so we can build a plan that says we need 1,200 of something that we can never get, or we can build a strategy that begins to meet that need in as close of a way as possible, right, to that. So if the city went and built 1,200 permanent supportive housing units and had the vouchers to attach and the services to attach and could pay for that annually, that could accomplish the same thing. That price tag is substantially higher than this one. And so that was the balance that we were trying to work
Sure,
toward.
except that we have housing dollars set aside to do permanent supportive housing. So if that strategy has to change from 24, 25 published documents, this is the first time I'm like cluing into it, and I think I've probably done a deeper dive on some of this than most. So I think we need to know, is the strategy changing?
No.
Because it's a little
I think that-
whiplash.
I think that's right. No, and I hear you on the whiplash. I think when we're talking about IoT dollars and investment, we're talking about like having the unit, having the assets and security and moving forward. But again, we should remember, this plan is based on what can we do immediately and ramp up, and how can we start to address street sleeping over the next 3 years. As those dollars start to get deployed, we're not gonna have 1,200 units over the next 3 years. That development phase is going to take a significant amount of time. So how can we address long-term stayers now? And then as that inventory of PSH comes in, like that can, again, reduce the need long-term. But what we're looking at here is what can we address in the immediate term? And then also, there could be a layering if we have the dedicated unit and we have the rental assistance. If the case management capacity happens in a built environment of PSH, that's just the location that it occurs in. Even with like the funding that we have in IoT dollars to develop permanent supportive housing, we still need the subsidy for the case management support and the rental assistance. So what this also allows us to do, at some point, we need to have units in the market that we can access. Right now, we're doing a great job working with landlords, but we're gonna need those dedicated units in the market. So these two things do overlap. I think part of this is understanding that continuing to wait to develop more units, and then depending 2, 3, 5 years from now on federal resources to subsidize those units is highly unpredictable, but also, again, we can't, currently somebody who's waiting for a PSH unit in our community, this means somebody who's already chronically homeless waits 367 days. They can't afford to wait, we can't afford to wait. But these two things are not separate in that sense. Even if we develop PSH, and even if we can reduce some of the operating costs through reserves, you still have to have a dedicated subsidy, most likely for the rental assistance and for the case management. And so these two things can align.
So is this strategy basically insulating us from federal kind of shifting priorities?
Yeah, and it's
I don't
absolutely
think,
intended
I'm just
to
gonna say,
insulate.
this is the first time I'm hearing that that's really what had pushed us in a different direction than we originally, for 2 years, were studying and crafting a plan for and going to voters for. So I just wanna just say that. I don't know if you're feeling that way. We've been in this the deepest, I think.
I'm learning a lot today. so
Yeah,
that's why
the other
talking
quick
matters.
question that I had is, in 5 months, we've served 68 in this way. our goal's to get to 300 by October. Like, how do we accelerate what we're doing? Because we're not on pace to serve 300 if we've only done 68.
Yeah, we're in I mean, of course you ramp up, and so we're in that period, but, with rapid resolution coming online too, so it's 300 deep interventions, it's all mapped out to serve that. We're on our next locations now, these next locations actually have a lot more individuals, so we'll almost double that
Okay.
pace very, very quickly. Plus, we have the rapid resolution starting, and rapid resolutions accumulate
And
very,
that's
very
the
quickly.
1,000,
Mhm.
so it's 1,300
Yep.
by October, with the 11 million.
Yeah, so we'll serve the 1,000 people by December.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then my final question is, so we've seen kind of 11 million, 20 million, 30, we see two on one of these slides, 2 30s, but we don't see how that plays out. Are we just planning to build a system that serves 3,100 people every year forever?
So I think
I mean,
that,
what is that based on?
I mean, it's based on the inflow analysis.
But then if we do eviction mitigation. and things
Sure.
like
I mean,
that-
that's, I guess my
Turn off the
question is
tap.
like, we're just building a ship to sail with 3,100 people on it every year.
Well, so the nice thing, so here's the nice thing, is that what you're investing in is service capacity. And so if all of a sudden that inflow goes down and you have extra service capacity, you can redeploy that capacity, right? You can move those resources. So you could say, oh, we don't need as much, let's move more upstream to even, reduce that demand, which is really different than having an asset that you have to maintain, right? So I think there's some
But have you-
advantage.
Have you modeled that out past 2028? Like, if we do these investments in this very intensive programming right now, what does that look like? I know we're really focused in on by 2028, but is it to 2038 and 2048 we're doing this? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Like, do you have?
There's no way for us to anticipate. I mean, what we're gonna presume at
I mean,
this
obviously the
juncture
conditions are
is that
shifting rapidly.
3,100 based on kind of this look back to 2022, which is kind of most reflective of modern conditions. What we want communities to do, and that's part of why we like doing the system model built into your own HDX environment, is that the system model becomes a part of your annual action planning activities.
Yeah,
And
I
so we
think-
wanna check in on that and then calibrate the investments in the system each year.
But
I
it
think
sounds
where
like
the
we're
struggle is
seeing-
asking citizens to commit to $30 million a year in perpetuity.
Yeah.
100%.
So we have, while we're also saying thank you for 75 million to build the housing, the
That's why I'm
13,000
asking the
units we
question
need.
about
Yeah.
community investment as a
So
whole.
if
Not just
that's the
putting all the burden
true
on
thing that needs to
Tulsa
happen, we
tax
need to
payers.
find a way to talk about it, because what we
I feel
said
like I'm
is,
butting my head against
if
the
we
wall.
build those 13,000 housing units, then our housing crisis frees up, and then there's not people locked out of housing. So like, is all that still accurate? If it's not, we need to just be able to say what it is and what it's
Right.
not. And that's where I'm
Or move
at
it to mental
agree.
health resources.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why it's a longer conversation. than it
Yeah,
really
then
is.
like even
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
minutes.
Yeah.
The other thing I will say is, what you're describing is activating two things simultaneously that both could have, right, a tremendous impact on that inflow. So the more housing you put into the market, the more you can stabilize prices. We might just reduce inflow that way, which would be incredible, right? We also need to build, right, a system that, what I call a rehousing system that can help springboard people, right, who will still experience some instability back into that market, or we want to be able to access that market that you're expanding. And so the question is, if we don't need as much here, that's okay. And so some communities, as they've contemplated, tax measures, they've put time limits on them in order to answer this question. So they've said, we're gonna do this for 5 years and then re-examine, right? And I would say where this takes place most frequently is gonna be out on the big coastal communities. I mean, so you're talking about huge dollar sums out there. But, the first initiative in LA, for example, was a 10-year, voter-approved tax. And then they came back and just re-upped it into perpetuity, forever. Because the voters are satisfied with the trajectory, right? So that, I just want to appreciate, I don't know that this has to be a forever commitment, but the model in front of us, we feel is pretty reliable in the 3 to 5 years that we want to kind of make these moves, that these would be the associated costs.
LA gives me heartburn because they have the worst homelessness issue in the
They-
country.
But they
So that
reversed their
example really-
trajectory.
LA.
I mean, that's great, but
Scale in a lot of different.
They have different laws.
like, that's not what I'm gonna
Well,
tell
and they're
people that are
GDP.
coming
No, I'm with you, that's why, it's not a great comparison, but,
Right.
but I want to appreciate that, that's a really fair
I
expectation.
just wanna ask, and I'm not saying it's on you.
Yeah.
In the people that are doing the strategic planning for the city side, are we looking at the two tracks? Are we looking at, as housing investments are made at every level, needed, identified in the housing strategy? What that looks like, because we're not in a vacuum. We know we're gonna build housing units, we're making the investment, and we're
Yeah, that ship
prioritizing
has
those
sailed.
things.
Yeah.
That ship has sailed or
Right.
is sailing.
Right, so that's why
Yeah.
I'm a little
Those
like, we had this
conversations.
housing strategy in 2024 and 2023 that like drove a lot of these decisions. Now I feel like we're on a different track. I know we're trying to solve a problem for our community, but I just wanna make sure that the scenario modeling we're looking at does factor in these other factors that we as a city and as citizens have said we're going to do. And I just, the 1,200 permanent supportive housing, like, seems like that's gone out the window, or we're just picking different units,
I
not
think-
necessarily new ones, or.
I think this is where, and I would love to have a deeper conversation about this. The investment in affordable housing and the investment in PSH is critically important. And we can make that investment and also not solve homelessness. We can make an investment in solving homeless services, and we won't expand or solve the issue for affordable housing and specific types of units that are needed in our community. I think what we're saying is we need both. We need resources to address people who are on the streets now. We need affordable housing both so that people can afford to live, work, and play and prevent homelessness. But also, we do need some specific type of units that can be more accessible or designed around a more supportive individual. So this is actually, I see these two things absolutely as critical investments and concurrent. They are a little bit distinct. Building more housing won't necessarily help the person who is spending 60 days in shelter to get back in. Unfortunately, what it's saying is like, it takes investment in both these areas, but the right investment could actually, long-term, reduce overall needed. It's just, I don't have a crystal ball and will predict exactly how that will go, but I think that's to the council to look over time, where have we made investments? And again, we would all be, I'm looking at Mac, extremely happy if inflows into homelessness reduce over time.
Which is
And-
definitely
and-
intentional
okay.
work that
Counselor, to your question on the city side, yeah, Jean Bolmash and I are hand in hand looking at this for the first time. There's this advisor on housing, advisor on homelessness, and those absolutely play together moving
On
forward.
the dollars.
Yeah.
Counselor Wakem, questions?
Okay, so I'm gonna
Are you finished,
start
Counselor
with,
Dr. Wright? Thank you.
with you just for clarification. So 14 days ago, let's say, there was a story about us being on a funding cliff, that we're gonna run out of money and everything like that. There's a schedule, and I can't remember all the schedule says right now in front of me. Are we, but I heard you say that we have until October to do a whole bunch of things, relating to the 1,000 people, relating to the 300 people. What is that? Is there a revised timeline now, or are we still on that same trajectory? I know that we will find an additional amount of money because
So the
of
six
things that are in
million, yeah, the
process.
$6 million from the city runs out. A lot of that ARPA dollars, those have to be expended by a certain period of time in August. And so and some of those opioid dollars, they will all be committed dollars. The ARPA dollars will be expended, everything else will be committed, and then we have no more dollars. That's where the funding cliff occurs.
no more in August or
while-
October.
Huh?
No more
Yeah,
in
I heard
August or
October, that's what I'm
No, but.
trying to figure out.
Right,
I
we've
heard
mixed-
October
We've
before,
mixed
and that was August.
public-private
August was in the paper.
dollars.
So it said October
And so
before.
the public dollars run out.
But there's-
Private dollars have been committed for, and so there's nothing else to commit or spend because those in phase one are all committed for. The spending will run out by October. But they've already been committed in the summer. So, right, you can't move past, so both are true.
But programming's still going through October. We're not hitting,
So
I'm
what we
not
will get
The
to.
spending stops
Right, but-
Because there's no more to commit to, but
Right.
the programming is going on.
Okay, I think that's,
So we'll get
I don't know
to,
if I
like, for,
understand.
so, for,
Yeah.
say for the
Yeah.
300 person.
it sounds like you're just saying that the money's all been allocated.
Correct.
Yeah,
And that it will actually be fully spent town.
right, it's
Allocated
committed.
by
October.
not
This,
August.
end of summer, it's committed dollars, so there's no more.
But if we, what if we don't have, what if we haven't served 1,300 people? But
Right, and what,
But-
yeah, like if
I-
those
I'm just
dollars
trying to
are,
make the math work in my head and
Right.
all these,
I think in the memo that, the first memo that you received, there's a detailed budget that breaks down between the public and the private.
I saw that.
And so when, we had to layer in, the two primary sources, of public funding from the city, and then there are actually, 5 other small bits of public money that Housing Solutions had that were infusing into this. And then we have the 4 million. And so whenever you start to get dollars that have different spending timelines,
Yeah.
different eligibility requirements, like that puzzle gets pretty gnarly.
Yeah.
And so what I think we're trying to articulate here is the 2 big public funding sources
Right.
that you all committed to, they're going to be completely obligated.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yes, we-
Yeah.
And spent in some cases because of the
Right.
required
Sure.
timeline for
Yeah,
spending,
that's
right? Then we're gonna be kind of inching our way, particularly on the rapid resolutions, beyond that, because those are funded largely through some of these other sources that
More
I'm
flexible
describing.
dollars, okay.
Right, and so the deep interventions work really comes to a grinding halt if we don't have some visibility to maintain
It
that.
comes to a halt when?
So,
when you get to 300 people, or
When you get to October or August.
300 people.
It's
or
300
300 people,
Whichever
that's what I'm
comes
thinking.
first. Whichever comes first.
And I'm
So,
gonna
that's a good
articulate,
point.
and I think we tried to articulate this in the article, and maybe somebody else chose what to put as the headline.
Yeah.
The funds will be obligated
Kevin
as in
left.
for those 300 people with the deeper intervention, we have committed to 12 months of assistance. So we can't help person 301. That individual, if we committed to 12 months of assistance, that has been obligated for. And so we're not gonna push somebody out at, early, but it means that we can't continue to help the next person, which means the activity stops. And at some point, you have to remember that we housed people in October of last year. And so if we don't have resources for capacity such as case management, then we actually do have to start reducing staffing capacity resources if we don't have the next phase committed. Even though we're gonna commit to 12 months of assistance for those 300 people in dedicated capacity, if we're not bringing in phase 2, then we start ramp down.
Okay,
Okay, so-
but just final question on this, because I know we have to move on, but it really is more triggered by people rather than months or dates, or, I know sources, we already went through that, I know how to spend,
yeah.
I
we
know
have-
you know how to spend those.
Yeah, we have a schedule, right? So like that spending schedule that was provided to all of you is rooted in this pace. And so,
The pace of
we're trying to stay
people.
on pace, yeah,
Yeah.
a certain number of people, right, associated with that. I think the other thing to appreciate too is that we need, we need dollars positioned by October, which means we need visibility, right, by August. Otherwise, we have to begin to initiate the ramp down period because people start to
I
cycle
don't
off.
understand the October thing if you haven't hit. If you only have housed 200 people, then why does October matter anymore?
You have capacity.
But we're
But
already
we
at
won't
20.
have, we will, so I just want to appreciate, if we stay on the pace
Okay,
that is
your-
modeled,
yeah, your
then we
assumption-
will not be,
Okay.
be at only 200 people.
Okay, yeah,
Okay.
you have all of these spreadsheets in your
Yes, I know,
mind.
I know.
We have one news story and one spreadsheet in
Yeah.
our mind, because that's just all we have.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to more fully understand this.
Yeah.
Okay, real quick on Clutch, what kinds of people do you have on the ground? Do you have people that are working with the agencies, that are instructing the agencies, that are working with Housing Solutions? I don't know how many people are here.
Yeah, so we, different members of our team kind of cycle in based on their expertise to support different parts of the equation. So I'm cycling in probably once a month or so, right,
Yep.
to support some of these activities. We have, I think there's 4 other individuals on the team have cycled through with various commitments, and they're out in the field with outreach workers, they're hosting workshops in partnership with the rapid resolution providers at, Tulsa Day Center, they're supporting the YWCA case managers, they're helping stand up complex case committee, so.
Okay.
Council, so memo from a couple weeks ago has a couple breakdowns around budget, and then the memo yesterday has a couple additional breakdowns. If there is something that would be more useful, let me know and get it to you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the context. The variables that are used in the spreadsheets that we got, and I understand that there's other spreadsheets that we don't have, and I'm not asking for all those spreadsheets, I don't need all that information, but I just have to understand what are the levers, what's pushing all of this? Because it's hard for me to get my head around the fact that we're gonna run out of money if we only house 68 people so far. But if the plan is to house 300 people by October and we actually do it, then I can say, okay, well, we may run out of money. But I also know that there's alternative sources of money out there that we can use internally to sustain, and if we can get the private sector to match those monies as they have, then we can probably re-up at the same amount for the next fiscal year without really having to do anything else, just based upon what we have here at the city already. One last question, does the chart, the bar chart, where 3,100 people are coming into the system, or whatever the number is every single year, does that change anywhere? In all of your experience across all of these towns, does it ever go down?
Well, you mean like after we've been doing this work for a period of
Yeah,
time?
what's the source of 3,100 new people every single year?
long-term.
Yeah, I mean, so.
Just a perpetual motion machine?
It's all associated with kind of poverty, right?
Yeah.
So the crisis of poverty, what's hard is that there's been tons of work done to try to reliably identify the indicators, like among all of the individuals experiencing poverty and housing instability, because many households are rent burdened. What would be the indicator that would tell us this one is going to end up in the homelessness response system versus this one? And the only reliable indicator in the evidence is having experienced literal homelessness in the past. And so that's what makes this a little bit difficult for me to answer your question as to why is it 3,100? It's all of these factors that nobody yet fully understands. There's some very cool predictive analytics work that's happening out of California and some other places, but we still don't have kind of all of the answers that were the simple answer of that. What I can tell you is there are some cities where I'm seeing that inflow increase dramatically year to year. And that is true in Dallas for us. And so, I think the point here is that the inflow continues to increase, but our point in time count continues to go down. So what that means is as we grow our capacity, we're meeting that demand, even though that demand continues to grow, in a way that's helping us bring down the overall census on any given day. So if we just looked at inflow and tried to evaluate, we can't judge the performance of the system based on inflow, right? We have no control over inflow. But all of a sudden we put the combination of things together and say, wait, these investments are in fact helping us
Move through the system.
respond to this increasing inflow.
And it's cost saving.
Yeah, that we can't control.
Okay, parting question, people believe that our inflow is increasing because people are being bused to Tulsa, is that true or false?
Broadly false.
Open arrow.
The qualifier here is, are people gonna come from outside your region if they're in a suburb or if they're in, a rural community and they experience instability and there are no services? You're the closest urban center, they're gonna come here.
Yeah.
Do people move and then find themselves experiencing homelessness? Yes, that is true. But
Our cities busing their people
Yeah.
here.
not that I am aware of.
That's what he's talking
And
about.
every
Yeah.
city
That's what
believes
makes
this
people-
is what's happening
I
today.
know. That's-
Wait,
It's
I have a
equal,
question.
every city believes that it's happening,
Yeah.
so
It's just
it's
allowed to put out
neutralized.
there.
So I have a question in regards to what Counselor Lincoln said, and the number of persons that we were talking about. And when the money runs out, with the budget season, so we're looking, as you said, Counselor Lincoln, at options of funding, passing money from different funds without raising taxes, and that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about using what's already in place.
Or at least exploring to see if
Exploring,
that's
right,
feasible.
but the possibility of the money running out, I just want the citizens to be clear that we're not talking raising taxes to support.
Some people are talking about.
I know that, but that's why I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, because I think people want to know, are we going to be paying taxes to subsidize? And I don't mean this in a bad way, I just mean that people really want to know what's gonna happen when that money runs out. And that's what I'm not getting a
We
clear
have to find $30 million.
understanding. Right, I get that, but I'm
Through
still
all
not finding a
sorts
clear
of-
understanding as to the path
Well,
when
that's
that
what we're
money
gonna have to
runs
figure it
out.
out.
So that's why I'm like, we're getting on that
I-
timeframe.
I think there's two things. One is exploring how do we maintain phase one, the work that is currently underway? And then what do we look at to continue the work moving forward? So there's two conversations that are wrapped up into one.
That ties in with
What is
my,
the- Can I ask, what's the maintain though? We spent $6 million, well, 10 or $11 million. I thought that was to get 300 people from
Point A to point B.
input to output.
Is it adding in 300 more people, or is it keeping some of those people housed, or
Yeah,
both?
It's the expanded beyond the 300.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
But
Yeah.
the
We
11
need
million should
to-
take care of the 300.
We need to get this last question in and then
I
move
have this
on.
last question that'll tie in with what you're about to answer and kind of speak to that.
So in order, when I think about maintaining and scaling, just to clarify, because right now in my head, or at least what I know of from listening, reading documents, et cetera, the people doing the really kind of high-touch wraparound service stuff, case management-wise, is largely YWCA's team.
right now.
Lighter touch is like what, largely day center?
So Light Touch is happening at the Tulsa Day Center, Salvation Army, and Mental Health Association is
Okay,
doing
that
that
makes
within
sense.
Salvation Army, and then at the Creox Winter Shelter, that's also
Okay.
begun as well.
Okay, that makes sense. When I go back to that higher touch wraparound service part, case managers can only do a caseload of whatever X number of people is at a time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we decommission X number of encampments, they max out, then what?
Then we can't do any more.
So
Well,
they
but-
have to
okay.
be close. How many cases can they?
But Tulsa Day Center.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're talking
there's
about adding,
additional-
I see what
I'm
you're
just
saying.
like, if we're
Case
having
management.
people,
Capacity.
it sounds like we have these, I'm just trying to understand how, if we could just end up spending down the money faster than before we hit 300 people, because it's like
We're-
these massive case management.
We're adding more
plans.
case
Yeah.
management, yes, capacity,
Okay.
yes, so.
Are those at other organizations?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we're past our 4 o'clock, so we
Okay.
really need to wrap this up. I appreciate you guys coming to the
Thank
table.
you. Important conversation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, it was
Thank
a
you.
very good conversation.
Yeah.
Adjourn, shall we take?
At least 5.